Well, we have that little animation because at 11:12 p.m. tonight, the leader of the world's largest arsenal and best fighting force was in the White House using his phone and did so again at 11:18. A dramatic reading follows. As the shutdown was going on, Nancy Pelosi asked me to give the State of the Union address. I agreed. She then changed her mind because of the shutdown, suggesting a later date. This is her prerogative. I will do the address when the shutdown is over. I am not looking for an alternative venue for the State of the Union address because there is no venue that can compete with the history, tradition, and importance of the House chamber. I look forward to giving a great, in quotes, State of the Union address in the near future. Donald J. Trump from the White House tonight. Now to the business of the process of this shutdown, forgive the phrase. The Washington Post reports tonight the White House is asking around to agency leaders for a list of programs that will be jeopardized if the shutdown continues into, say, March and April. The Post points out, quote, it's the firmest evidence to date that the White House is preparing for a lengthy funding lapse. Tomorrow, the U.S. Senate, your U.S. Senate, is expected to vote on two competing bills to reopen the government. Here's the problem. One of them is Trump's plan he announced on Saturday that would include the wall. The other is a short-term bill to get the government up and funded, get people paid through February 8th. Both bills are expected to fail. Some House Democrats say they're working on a deal that would offer more technology spending at the border. NBC News reports this counteroffer would, quote, meet or exceed $5.7 billion for border security, asterisk, but no money for a physical wall. Democrats still hold the position that the government should first be reopened immediately before negotiations take place over border security. At the same time, the counteroffer signals some movement on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, as the shutdown drags on, we got this stern message from the vice president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association today.
We cannot be in this any longer. It is already less safe than it was a month ago when we shut down. We have critical components to safety that are not there. We have processes not there, training not taking place, distraction in the workplace. We have controllers actually reporting to us that they're making mistakes when they are giving clearances, clearing planes in places where they shouldn't be clearing them, in conflicts with other airplanes because they're so stressed out about how they are going to take care of their family. Their livelihood is threatened at this point.
Some outlets where they had personnel shortages. Before the shutdown, some controllers were working 6 days a week, 10-hour-a-day shifts. And tonight, unions for air traffic controllers, pilots, and flight attendants, after all, released a statement saying there is growing concern for safety in their industry due to the government shutdown. It reads in part, quote, if in our risk-averse industry we cannot even calculate the level of risk currently at play, nor predict the point at which the entire system will break, it is unprecedented. With us to talk about all of it, Jeremy Peters, political reporter for the New York Times, and Anita Kumar, now White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico. Anita, it boggles the mind that we are about to, with straight faces, have a conversation about, God forbid, a disaster or loss of life required as a triggering mechanism to get both sides to reopen our federal government after a month.
I actually have been hearing that for the last few days, that even people close to the White House are saying that they will not budge, that the Democrats won't budge, and until there's an accident or some kind of security, safety issue, both sides aren't going to come to the table. But I think you hinted here that there is going to be some movement. This House proposal that they're talking about, I think that's probably going to go somewhere. I mean, clearly the Senate bills that are coming up are not going to go somewhere. I think the House saying that they would look at spending some money, not necessarily on a wall, but on enforcement issues, is going to get some attention.
Jeremy, same question to you. And what just happened to the balance of power, at least within the Beltway? In the past few minutes, the president has agreed, something we've never had, to a State of the Union that will await a reopened government.
Right. I think, Brian, the ultimate impact of the president's tweet just now saying he'll wait to give his State of the Union is pretty minimal. I mean, it just kind of adds the latest twist in this ongoing squabbling back and forth. Give your speech, Mr. President. No, wait, you can't give your speech. Well, now you can't go on your trip. I'm going to give the speech anyway. No, you're not. I guess now we're at, okay, I won't give the speech. So I guess we'll wait to see whatever happens tomorrow, which, at this point really could be anything, although I have been hearing slightly more optimism that at least with the Senate votes, though those are doomed to fail, it appears that that could provide some type of forward-moving momentum here to get the gears of government at least somewhat grinding again.
Anita, Jeremy just used the O word for optimism. Are you hearing any of that being shared, especially the subset of that question is Republican defections? Who's had enough?
Yeah, it's been going on for quite some time, right? So you think that both sides would have enough. I mean, every paycheck, I think, that goes by that people aren't getting and messages like you heard before about safety, I think that it's going to get there. But both sides are just really dug in on this. I mean, you mentioned the State of the Union thing back and forth. I mean, this just shows you that they are not looking to compromise. They both have their way and they want their way. So, I just go back to this House proposal that's out there. To me, that's the sort of only glimmer of hope. I don't know that I would say optimism, though, because the president has been adamant that he still wants this wall. It's something he campaigned on, he talked about, and that he thinks that it's necessary and that he wants to get the money for it, that this is the time for him to try to do that.
Jeremy, I have three visuals and then a question. Visual number one is a letter by all the former secretaries of Homeland Security. As cabinet agencies go, it hasn't been around that long, but they all signed on to this letter saying, in effect, end this. It also includes the former Homeland Security Secretary, General Kelly, who is the most recent White House Chief of Staff. Visual number two is some polling information, and it shows the president deeply underwater when people were asked the question by CBS News pollsters, is this border wall worth the government shutdown? 71% say it is not worth it. Now add to that the following visual. This is all the aircraft over the United States right now. See some of those routes that really pop, like DFW up to New York, the European flights leaving this time of night to begin their long arcing flight over the North Atlantic, and all the Pacific activity as well. That's what the skies over this country look like. And here's a prediction. They will all land safely tonight because of the true professionals, the public servants working without pay in all the TRACON stations, all the local towers at all the airports in this country. But for how long, Jeremy? And our first question comes back, God forbid, is this going to take a tragedy?
I sure hope not. But I think what this speaks to more than anything else, Brian, is the degradation of our political culture and the willingness that political leaders have to really subject government workers to this prolonged period without pay, but also to show blatant disrespect for the government, for the functions of our government that our Constitution has set up. And it's really a change from this when these things were rare, right? Or when politicians had more of a capacity for shame, when the Republican Party dared not shut down the government for 20 years after the 1995 and 1996 shutdowns because they thought it was not only bad politics, but bad governance. That kind of shame doesn't exist anymore in today's Republican Party, because what you've had over the last 10 years or so is a party that is more and more hostile to government. They think that government doesn't do much good for them. When, of course, there's plenty of evidence and money in their Social Security accounts and money paying for their Medicare prove otherwise. But I just don't see a Republican Party that exists anymore where shutdowns are perceived as bad politics, even though the overwhelming majority of Americans don't like them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.